We're just waiting for a few last-minute participants to sign on, and we'll begin the webinar in about 2 minutes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Meet Your Sustainable Development Goals by Investing in Climate Change Mitigation Projects. My name is Nicole Nagaiwi, Key Account Manager at the South Pole Group, and I will be guiding you through today's presentations. Last year, world leaders pledged to adopt 17 goals to end poverty, fight inequality, and tackle climate change. Collectively, these goals have been coined the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, we will be addressing some of the ways that your organization can help achieve these ambitious targets through climate change mitigation projects. Our speakers are John Davis, Director of the Financial Industry, Florian Reimer, Project Manager for Land Use and Geographical Information Systems, Marie Bleuet, our Head of Renewables, and Tilman Silber, Practice Leader for Sustainability Action and Water. The agenda for today is the following. John will begin by giving a brief overview of the South Pole Group, for those of you who don't already know us. He will then give some background on the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular how these differ from the Millennial Development Goals. Finally, he will provide an overview of climate change mitigation projects and how these can be used to support local development efforts. He will then hand the floor over to Florian, Tilman, and Marie, who will give 3 concrete examples. Florian will be providing an in-depth example of how climate change mitigation projects drive development efforts, drawing on his own experience at a local project site in Zimbabwe. Tilman will provide an example of an insurance company that is developing its own climate change mitigation project in Indonesia. And Marie will take us through some of the ways renewable energy solutions may be used to support the Sustainable Development Goals. Finally, John will conclude the presentation by providing a brief overview of our offering for investors, including South Pole Group's work in the area of green bonds and project finance. If you have any questions related to any of our presentations, please don't hesitate to post these in the question panel on the right side of your screen. A selection of these questions will be answered at the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And so without further ado, I would like to hand over to John. John, please just unmute your mic to begin.
Thanks, Nicole, and welcome to today's webinar, everyone. It's good to have you on board. I'm John Davis, based in London, and lead South Pole's approach to our clients within the financial industry. We find the financial sector leading the way in terms of their approach to sustainability. In fact, another notable name, the Bank of America, set out yesterday its ambitions to cut location-based greenhouse gas emissions by 50% and to source 100% of their electricity from renewable sources by 2020 as part of its new membership to the RE100 campaign. A small introduction on the South Pole Group for those that have not worked with us before. We're a global climate change specialist, and this year celebrate our 10th year as a company. We've got 19 offices around the world, headquartered in Zurich, with a growing presence in London. As a result of our wide network, the South Pole Group have developed an incredible capacity to both measure and reduce climate impact, and specifically in relation to this webinar, how this measuring and reduction corresponds to the Sustainable Development Goals. Here on this slide, you can see 4 distinct partitions to the South Pole Group business. On the left are our carbon credit solutions. These include carbon offsets and insetting, 2 topics which Florian and Tilman will go into more detail on shortly. The second column reflects our solutions in renewable energy, which Marie will expand on. And the third section, which we label as green finance, I'll touch on briefly today, in particular with green bonds and project finance. The final column on the right represents our advisory services. Moving on to the next slide, this portrays our own impact that we've measured since our inception. Specifically relevant, the number on the top right, we've now developed over 500 emission reduction and renewable energy projects around the world, which also include local insetting projects for our clients. Other highlights on this slide include the number on the top left, preventing more than 80 million tons of carbon emissions from being released into the atmosphere over the last 10 years, and below that, producing over 100,000 gigawatt hours of renewable energy. It's been a busy first 10 years. We work with some of the largest and most sustainable companies in the world across a number of industries to help them achieve their targets and implement new and innovative ways to reduce their climate impact. So on to our topic, the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. South Pole have seen a huge transition within the climate change and sustainability sector in the 10 years that we've been in business. Gone are the days when companies purely purchased carbon offsets or renewable energy for the sake of the product alone. Companies that previously purchased a sustainable product now want to contribute financially to low-income communities and instigate many other social or environmental co-benefits. These co-benefits have in the past been difficult to quantify or categorize. So with the introduction of the Sustainable Development Goals almost to this day, 1 year ago, and with the subsequent indicators for the SDGs released in March this year, the relevance of and the ability to quantify sustainable projects within our portfolio became apparent. So what are the SDGs? As you're no doubt aware, the SDGs are a set of 17 goals, illustrated here on this slide. The goals break down to 169 targets, each of which is summarized by the title of each goal. They include a broad range of targets in sustainable development, from balancing gender inequality to ending poverty and hunger, and notably to this audience, the goal on the bottom left of the graphic, combating climate change, goal 13. We know that these goals will form the basis of investment decision-making for the public sector, but what do they actually mean for businesses such as yours? The SDGs don't explicitly talk about the role of the private and for-profit sector, but they do extend the conversation and action on sustainable development beyond governments to include other agents of change. That means businesses, cities, citizens, and civil society. Therefore, the private sector does play a key role in translating the qualitative language of the SDGs into effective implementation of change on the ground. So why do the SDGs matter to us? I've selected 3 quotes on this page which reiterate why the SDGs are important, but I think the one in the middle of this page from Keith Weed of Unilever sums the question up best. Simply, the brands that have not yet caught on to this and are not thinking how they will embed environmental and social sustainability within their business model will not be around in the next 50 years. 3 other points that make the SDGs important to us. The SDGs recognize that we have a combined effort from the international community to understand the needs of those around the world who would most benefit from the goals. Secondly, they provide clear guidelines for all companies to adopt in accordance with their own priorities and environmental challenges. And finally, they help you, our attendees in this conference today, make the right choices now to improve life in a sustainable way for future generations. As Forbes magazine wrote last week, it's a battle plan for planet Earth. This is a fascinating slide. It gave us at South Pole confidence that we're spending the time and effort developing products which reflect the SDGs for the right reasons. The top figure, 70%, is the number of CEOs that recognize the importance of the SDGs and their relevance in business. And if you cast your eye over the SDG graphic on the right, you can see that climate action is the most popular goal for sustainability professionals to engage with. We'll expand on this goal on the next slide. Sustainable Development Goal 13. Take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Climate change is such a significant part of the SDGs that has its own goal. Like South Pole's own climate change solutions, the goal of climate action is also incorporated into other relevant goals such as clean water and affordable and clean energy. Many of our products are based around the supply of more sustainable clean energy, in particular to remote locations where energy supply is non-existent. There's no country in the world that's not experiencing firsthand the drastic effects of climate change. Greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise and are now more than 50% higher than the 1990 level. Global warming is causing long-lasting changes to our climate system, which threaten irreversible consequences if we don't take action now. So how can businesses integrate the SDGs into their sustainability strategy? 17 goals and 169 targets are a huge amount for any company, no matter what the size. However, any company with a sustainability, renewable energy, or offsetting strategy will already be attuned to the SDGs and investigating how they'll be applicable for them. Key questions being, how do we quantify this and how are we directly contributing? Here's an example of Novo Nordisk, the Danish multinational pharmaceutical company. They identified the 7 goals which are most relevant to their core business and systematically review their contribution to each one. They then go on to report their contributions and commitments quarterly. One of their specific targets is integrating climate change measures into their policies, strategies, and planning. Novo Nordisk, by recognizing the threat of climate change, are able to responsibly introduce SDG mitigation solutions into their corporate responsibility strategy. We now move on to the more specific products that the South Pole Group develop and how they relate to the SDGs, our climate mitigation products. As mentioned earlier, these are the topics we'll walk through for you, beginning with the carbon credit solutions, specifically our carbon offset projects. South Pole Group, as a global developer of carbon offset projects, have found the key to our success has been documenting social and environmental benefits of our projects. We now have the capacity to quantify a project's co-benefits directly in relation to its contribution to the SDG goals. Additionally, we can analyze a mixture of products which form part of your entire sustainability strategy and aggregate your combined contributions to the SDGs. An example of a project whose benefits we've quantified for this webinar is the Kariba Red Plus project shown here. At this point, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Florian Reimer, who has actually helped develop this project and seen its contributions firsthand. Florian's South Pole Group's climate advisor on Red Plus and is the technical leader of the Kariba Red Plus community project in Zimbabwe. I'd like Florian to give you an on-the-ground insight into how supporting an emission reduction project such as Kariba does so much more than simply offsetting the emissions of a company. Florian.
Yes, thank you very much, John. Yeah, I had the privilege to work with the fantastic people and team of the Kariba Red Plus project since 5 years. What is a Red Plus project? It's a project to reduce emissions of deforestation and degradation. And this project does this in union with the local communities of the autonomous rural district councils that govern their own land and that were severely affected by a series of drought events and very unsustainable agricultural practices. Zimbabwe has gone through some economic changes and challenges in its agricultural sector and has basically pushed more and more people towards family agriculture in areas that were previously reserved for wildlife conservation and biodiversity on soils that are not particularly fertile, especially when not farmed with the adequate methods. This has led to a lot of deforestation before the project started in 2011, and by now we are 5 years hand in hand with the project team working to bring improved agriculture wildlife conservation and food security, increased health for local clinics, and education to the local people. The project has been verified by independent auditors at 3 different times and is continuing to surmount but conquer challenges. And as I have visited the project 5 times myself, and I'm scheduled to go there in November again, and I know the people and the project team, I know how they use every dollar available to make an impact on the ground. That's why I can 100% support the complete additionality of this project, and you can quote me on that. Florian Reimer believes in this project, and if I have any professional credentials, so has this project. I'd like to dive in a little bit more into the other sustainable development benefits that we're seeing. So to give you a bit of regional context of the Kariba Red Plus project, it's home to a number of very valuable species, vulnerable species that suffer from the risk of extinction, including African elephants, but also cheetahs, lions, rhinoceros, species of vulnerable vultures, and a large number of wildlife species. What is special about the project is that it is filling a gap in regional wildlife conservation. You see a little map there where the blue areas represent the actual project area of the Kariba Red Plus project. And you can see that in this part of northern Zimbabwe, the blue areas exactly connect a number of safari areas, those are the orange ones, and national parks, those are the green ones. They're now connected by the project area into a large biodiversity corridor, which allows wildlife to move and populate and procreate in a much larger area, which is necessary for this large wildlife. This is part of the critical Zambezi and Miombo ecosystem that has been identified by the United Nations as a critical biodiversity hotspot. And move on to the next slide of the sustainable development benefits. Here we are. Obviously, the project is tackling the goal of climate change by reducing deforestation, and by reducing deforestation, it reduces wildfires and forests being burned and cut, and this reduces emissions of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. The project is over the lifetime of 30 years previewed to reduce emissions of 44 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalents, and independent auditors have already verified that it has in the last 5 years reduced about 10 million of those emissions. As I said, the project contribute largely to wildlife conservation and biodiversity management in the area, and so we contribute to the goal 15 of land.
I hope everybody can hear me, and that topic is renewable energy, and specifically renewable some troubles moving the slide. Yes, here we are. So, as mentioned previously, renewable energy certificates are part of the solutions available to corporates to support the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, RECs are anchored in national laws in many regions around the world, and thereby the obvious choice when wanting to switch from conventional to renewable energy consumption. But to take a step back and a bit of a quick RECs 101, the principle behind RECs is that for every megawatt hour of renewable energy produced, 1 REC is issued. This certificate is then sold and traded separately from the underlying produced power. So why do we talk about RECs specifically now? Last year, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol Scope 2 guidance was published. Scope 2 covers any emissions associated with the electricity consumed by a company. The CDP and RE100 quickly adopted the criteria outlined in the GHG protocol, and thereby allowing for an international market for renewable energy certificates. So, in a nutshell, we now have clear guidelines as to what instruments to choose and how to use them in order to claim renewable energy consumption around the world. I mentioned earlier that regulation is oftentimes implemented in national laws. This is the case in North America, Europe, where it's called the European Electricity Certificate System, or short EECS, but also Australia or Japan. However, as shown on the map, there are many more regions today where we can offer renewable energy solutions that are recognized by the aforementioned standards, are tradable and available to companies. Examples are the International REC standard or the newly developed TIGERs, as well as renewable PPAs in many regions around the world. South Pole's experience lies in developing voluntary carbon and renewable energy projects. As such, we have a wide network of product developers that we call on now to move this development of global REC solutions forward. Also, the situation is constantly evolving. The most recent IREC country, for instance, was Colombia, and North African countries will come on board very soon. But the window on Mexican PPAs, for instance, is closing. So it is important to keep an eye on this developing situation. I mentioned the basic REC solutions in established and emerging markets previously. For companies that want to go beyond pure tracking of renewable energy, there are other solutions available. These come, for instance, in the form of quality label, like Green E, Eco Energy, or Gold Power. These labels provide additionality aspects, such as investments in renewable energy funds, for instance, that you would not have if you just chose for RECs. Also, oftentimes it can make economic sense to opt for renewable PPAs. In some markets around the world, this is possible for very small volumes already. So if this is of interest, it's worth investigating where this is a possibility. Whenever opting for a PPA, it's important to buy the environmental attributes together with the purchase power, as without the RECs, no claims regarding renewable energy can be made, and hence oftentimes the renewable energy consumption goals cannot be achieved. When selecting what renewable energy solution is right for you, there are a few considerations that are worth making, especially when trying to achieve a link to the SDGs. Co-benefits, additionality, age of plant are all important considerations. The next slide shows an example of a project that is interesting to have a look at in this context. This Mexican IREC project has far-reaching local and social impacts that are linked to the SDGs. We have improvements made to the local economy, as well as to education programs. Of course, climate action is taken as well. Environmental improvements are made, such as reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. This project is one example of projects that can
to insetting. Insetting as a term is derived from offsetting, and what it has in common with offsetting that it's climate change mitigation projects that help to compensate the CO2 footprint of our clients. So it basically helps our clients to create climate neutral products, or to help to create climate neutral companies, entire companies. What is different from offsetting is that insetting is really about new projects and setting up new projects customized for our clients in their supply chain or in other locations which are strategically relevant for our clients. So our work is very much focused on setting up these projects and designing the project concept in very close collaboration with our clients. The concept of, I'm going to show you the concept of insetting. This is working with this. Here's a definition of insetting as we define it. Insetting is an innovative approach that aligns tailor-made carbon compensation projects with a company's broader sustainability strategy. So as I mentioned, this can be in the supply chain. It can also be more in the CSR, aligned with the CSR strategy. It allows companies to create managerial and financial synergies while unlocking additional opportunities from the global carbon markets. We developed this concept very closely with a Swiss retailer that we pioneered this with like 5 years ago. That is Coop Switzerland. Coop chose insetting in order to achieve climate neutrality of certain products, the air freight products that they're flying in, while also achieving goals to improve the livelihoods of communities, and particularly farmers, along the supply chain of certain goods, including coffee, including roses and others. So we're developing, together with Coop and actually jointly with WWF Switzerland as well, a whole portfolio of projects globally where we both invest into local companies, local farmers, and improve their livelihoods, as well as creating carbon credits that are used by Coop Switzerland in order to reduce the footprint of some of their products. This slide is on a recent case that we did where we used insetting for a client from the financial industry. Specifically, this is a globally active insurance company which has a large-scale program. So we worked for them to try to identify a project that could serve both purposes. On the one side, the flood prevention, on the other side, reducing CO2. So we found a project opportunity in the Ciliwung watershed in upstream of Jakarta in Indonesia. The Ciliwung is a river that is about 120 kilometers flowing all the way to Jakarta, and it's suffering from basically annual flooding. A key reason of these flooding is upstream land degradation. Deforestation leads to increased stormwater runoff, it increases soil erosion, and essentially also then leads to siltation in the river. And all these are key drivers of flooding. So what we're doing there is working very closely with local communities in order to restore the landscape and the forest landscape, particularly by planting new forests, by helping the forest to regenerate naturally, and also protect certain forest patches. So basically, again, for them, it's a project that serves their flood prevention program, as well as helping the company to be climate neutral. And over and beyond, it helps to contribute to at least 5 different SDGs that are listed below. Health, so the prevention of flooding, clean water, SDG 6 on clean water and sanitation, by providing better water and helping to preserve the water resources, sustainable infrastructure and communities, SDG 6, climate action, and then 15, life on land through the preservation of forest habitat upstream. How are we putting into place such an insetting project? Basically, we're following 4 distinct steps that we use across all different kind of insetting projects. Step 1 is the project design. Here, a lot of that is really about the local partners. So identifying which partners are out there, what are their capabilities, and the risk and benefits of working with them. Then we look into costs and the activities related that we want to implement there. A risk, so what are the factors that could make our project fail in the future? And also, and this is a very important point, looking into the business model of such a project. So where next to carbon could a project generate additional revenue streams? This could, for example, be from sustainable forestry. It could be from non-timber forest products. It could be from agriculture and other points. Additional revenue streams help to make basically the project more cost effective for our clients, because the carbon finance part of the overall project budget can be lower if you have additional revenue streams. Second part, carbon and co-benefit assessment. So we're helping the client to find the right solution for his preference on how we are going about the monitoring and the reporting and the certification of both the carbon side as well as the co-benefit side of the project. We are forecasting the benefits into the future. So in the project, in the case of Co-op, we are generating VRR, so gold standard certified carbon credits, and we're forecasting these into the future. And we're also helping to set up a monitoring plan that really helps to implement a rigid monitoring scheme for the project going forward over the years to come. Step 3 is the financial infrastructure, particularly for our clients. And here we distinguish between two major mechanisms. One is results-based finance. That's basically how it works in offsetting. So funds are only transferred whenever the carbon credits are actually generated and issued. And then the other is more traditional approach, milestone payments. So this is often a more upfront project support by our client. And in setting, we often use a mix of both because these projects have quite heavy upfront costs before we can generate the first carbon credits. And we have to help the project to overcome these initial years of this initial time of setting it up. But then we switch to a results-based finance approach, very similar to offsetting. We also work on a cash flow model and risk sharing, so to make sure that all the involved partners understand what their cash flow is, when they need what kind of investments, and that we come up with a fair risk sharing for all involved partners. And step 4, finally, is the implementation. We provide to our clients basically a turnkey solution for project management, where we are both on the ground, really managing the local project, managing the partners there, managing the cash flows and so forth, but then also can report this back basically to the headquarters somewhere in Europe of our clients and help them to understand what's going on locally and what the risks are and how they should manage the project. We're also working on monitoring and verification. This can include external audits, often it does, and management of funds. So this is the deployment of funds to the project. So this is one case how insetting can work in the financial industry. I think there are many others, particularly how insetting can help financial industry players to align both carbon neutrality as well with along with their more general CSR strategy. So things that come to my mind are micro-insurances, microfinance, renewable energy and rural electrification programs, agriculture, climate smart agriculture, sustainable agriculture project, or also sustainable forestry projects where clients could combine both their CSR targets or maybe even their business strategy in these fields with carbon neutrality. Thank you.
Thanks, Tilman. Insetting is a very fascinating topic, so great to hear your comments there. We're just going to skip back through the presentation to the other end, so please bear with us, and we will discuss our last topic, which is in investor solutions. Within investor solutions, we're talking about solutions that are linked to financial instruments, and I just want to demonstrate our activity in this sector as well. As a company that specializes in measuring climate change, we're also active within the green bond market, particularly assisting companies both on the buy and sell side to measure the impact of a green bond and identify the contributions to the relevant SDGs. And our final solutions in an area which is starting to see a lot more growth, which is in sustainable project finance. As a project developer, this is a field where we have the most experience, and we have the expertise to assist you in building an impact investment fund. We can help identify, develop, manage renewable energy projects around the world. These projects would begin obviously with a feasibility study, which naturally encompasses a net contribution towards the SDGs. So to our conclusions. I hope you found this webinar informative. To reiterate, the link between the high-level goals and the concrete implementation path of the SDG falls to you, the corporate stakeholders. Being highly focused and performance-driven, your organizations can turn aspirations into facts on the ground. Your businesses now have options to turn to when carrying out this practical translation work. Solutions for project finance and for measurement and monitoring of your sustainability actions. Various examples already show that engaging in sustainable practices reflect positively on an entire business, way beyond the bottom line. So to reiterate the points here on our last slide, the challenge is to move beyond business as usual. Sustainability within the private sector has to shift from CSR storytelling to stimulating new business practices. By contributing to the agenda advocated by the SDGs, business can move from pure sponsorships to policy development and to international standard setting. Finally, acquiring a more focused direction on how to boost the contributions to your sustainability goals is a pivotal tool for sustainable competitiveness. And now I'll pass back to Nicole to wrap up the webinar.
Thank you, John, and also thank you to all of our other presenters. We'd now like to hand over to the audience for a short Q&A. Many thanks to our presenters for your answers. Let me just check what questions we have. Okay, so the first question is, why are the SDGs more relevant now than the MDGs were? John, I'm guessing this one's for you.
Sure, happy to take it. We did touch on the MDGs earlier. I'm assuming that most of our audience is aware of them. They basically ran from 2000 to 2015, so the predecessors to the SDGs. The MDGs had 8 goals, and they applied more to countries as opposed to actual individual companies. So they're really considered targets for poor countries to achieve, with the financing provided from wealthier countries. The SDGs were effectively a more inclusive process. So what makes the SDGs more relevant to us than the MDGs is that really every country now is expected to work towards achieving those goals. I guess that's the primary differences there.
Thanks a lot. Let me just check for the next question. So with IREX and Tigers developing at the same time, how should a company choose between the two? Marie, I'm guessing that one's for you.
Yes, thank you, Nicole. Good question. Very concrete. This is a hot topic right now, as the landscape for renewable energy solutions is very quickly evolving. So right now we have one country, Singapore, where you have IREX and Tigers available. And at the end of the day, a company must choose which instrument is the right choice for them. We at South Pole are product agnostic to a certain extent. However, of course, we want to, it's important for us that we work together with our clients. And if their goal is to choose for instruments that are reportable, we look at the standards that are out there and see if the instruments that are up for discussion are in line with the criteria set out in those standards. IREX are mentioned specifically by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. Tigers are not right now, but that doesn't mean that maybe in another version they would be mentioned as well. They seem to be ticking all the boxes. So it's a dialogue, really, a dialogue between the end consumer, intermediaries, and the players that are setting up these criteria and these standards. And during such a dialogue, it becomes pretty clear what the right solution is.
Thank you, Marie. And it looks like we have another question for Florian. So do you think the SDGs will encourage more investment in the types of projects you just described?
We certainly hope so. We hope that as the SDGs were formed in a more inclusive process with more stakeholders and a wider consultation, and their relevance for that John has elaborated on, that more people come to the table and see the benefit of investing in solutions that are connected to several benefits and several sustainable development goals. I hope I was able to show how the Kariba project is delivering on several sustainable development goals with an integrated concept. And as I said, due to the challenges with drought and food crises, every dollar is needed and maintenance on the ground. So we do hope that more people will take the sustainable development perspective, support.
Thanks, Florian. Now, if there are no more questions, we've reached the end of our Q&A session. Many thanks to all of our presenters for your answers. In order to help us improve for future webinars, we would welcome your feedback on how you think today's webinar went. We will be sending out a brief feedback poll by email and would very much appreciate your comments. And of course, if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or any of the other presenters today. We would, of course, love to hear more about your commitments to the Sustainable Development Goals. We'd also like to thank you for your attendance and hope that our webinar has helped to provide some clarity on how you can support the Sustainable Development Goals through climate change mitigation projects. We hope to see you at more of our webinars in the future. Thanks again. Bye.